Right then, hello all, welcome back to Tired Format, and this video is going to be a bit different from the others. I threatened a while back to do a video where I basically go through all my cars and rate them, so I'm completely unprepared. I've just got a list of my cars I've owned and I'm going to rate them. So I think it's 37 cars I've owned now. I've been driving for about 12 years, no crashes, none of that, nothing written off or stolen actually. None of that, just buying and selling, getting bored of something, moving it on, getting the next thing, blah, blah. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna talk through the list and I'll put some pictures up and sort of talk about those a little bit, how I bought them, why I bought them, what I thought of them, probably marks out of 10 or something, and we'll go from there. So yeah, grab a cup of tea because this is gonna be a bit of a long one. Okay, let's start at the beginning, shall we? That's logical. So first car was a 2009 Renault Clio GT, and it was 2009-ish when I passed my test, so it was pretty much brand new at the time. I was very lucky to have a brand new car. I basically shared it with my mum, but it was mine. I was the main driver on the policy and all that sort of expensive jazz. So yeah, it was Malta Blue, which was specific to that car. They basically put the Twingo RS engine in a Clio, a bit of a body kit, the RS seats and things like that, just to make it a bit sportier. I think they tweaked the suspension as well. So really good for a first car, having a 1.6 with 130 horsepower and a bit of a tweaked suspension. I think that set me up nicely for enjoying cars that are a bit more fun to drive. However, after that, when I bought my own car for myself, finally, it was all down to insurance, as I'm sure it is still today for young lads and ladies. I decided to go down the VW scene route, you know, slamming it in wheels, because I couldn't have anything quick, so I may as well just have something that I like to look at, I thought was cool, etc. So first car I bought was a Volkswagen Bora S. So that's poverty spec, and it was a 1.6 because it was the cheapest thing to insure. It's still about 100 horsepower, I think, so it was actually all right. It wasn't too slow, and you could drive longer distances in it without being, you know, shaken to death. I still maintain that the MK4 Golf / Bora is one of the most refined cars on earth, even in the age they are now. I'm going to skim through the other Boras I've had because there's been two more. So I've had 3 Boras in total, which is boring, yes. So the green Bora is the first car that I really worked on myself, other than playing about a little bit. I actually lowered it myself using eBay cheap £200 coilovers. I was working in Halfords part-time, and on my day off, I parked it in the car park and just started doing it, really. So it was a bit more difficult. I struggled, broke some tools that were owned by the company as well. And I remember going into the bike hut and borrowing tools and stuff. I was out there for hours just trying to get one of the front hubs to knock off. But yeah, it taught me a lot about cars, that, because I made some mistakes and had to fix them and stuff like that. And the next car after that was a MK1 Golf driver, which is kind of like, it has a bit of GTI body kit, but it's a 1.3. It was a 4-speed 1.3. But yeah, again, lowered myself, did a load of mods to it. I put leather Honda CRX seats in it for some reason. The paint on it was knackered, so I got my mate, I sprayed one of the front wings white and got my friend to do some like graffiti stuff on it. I don't know, I was young and it was the style at the time. Then I decided that I didn't want an old car anymore, and I wanted the biggest engine that I could possibly insure, which is why I bought, for a very brief period, I owned an Audi A4 with the 2.4 V6 in it, which I think was like 140 horsepower. It was not a lot of power, but for some reason it was cheap to insure. So I bought that. I got fleeced on that. There were so many issues with it. It was pinking all the time. It needed all the good fuel in it because it was so rubbish, and it was just ugh. And I'd got rid of the Golf, the MK1, because it was a pain in the ass because it kept breaking down and things like that. Got this, and it was even bigger pain. Then I left the world of working in Halfords, went into motorsport, got a job that required a bit of commute, so I bought a diesel Bora, threw it on air ride, got some roof wheels on it, blah, blah, blah. You don't care about that. Once I got a job that lived local after a year or so, I decided to buy a Mazda MX-5 for £150 off my friend because he was going to scrap it. Probably spent about a couple £100, get it back on the road, drove it round for a bit, then realised with my new job I could probably delve into the world of car finance and was very tempted by new cars, old cars, blah, blah, blah. When I sold the Bora, I also sold all the modifications separately. So I was actually quite good, had quite a bit of money in my pocket to spend. In the end though, I got a 2006 Golf GTI Mark 5. It was shadow blue, 3-door with the 17s and the cloth seats, which is what I wanted. Had a sunroof, which I wasn't that keen on, but it's fine. Yeah, and to this day, that was the first GTI I've owned out of four GTIs. Two of them being Mark 5s. I still think it's one of the best cars in the world. It's just so good, so refined, so fun to drive. I couldn't recommend that enough. I'm gonna start rating them now, because this is where they get interesting and less boring. I'd still, to this day, give the Mark 5 Golf GTI probably about an 8 out of 5. It would have been a 9, but now they're getting a bit older, they're a little bit more unreliable. So I couldn't sit here in good faith and tell you they're 10 out of 10. You go buy one and the chain snaps or the belt snaps or the cam follower falls in through the engine like it did the one I just sold to my friend. Sorry, Jamie. At some point I bought I think I still had the Golf at this point. I got drunk on a night out, yeah, another one of those, and decided that I'd agree to buy my friend's BMW 323i cab, E36, manual, black, silver exterior. That was the first car I de-chavved, actually. Someone had put clear Lexusy lights on the back. It had all the trim really badly colour-coded. It had, yeah, it just wasn't quite right. So I tidied that up, we tidied the trim up, and it looked really tidy. Only problem was it burnt so much oil, like the plumes of smoke out the back. So I just ragged it around for a bit. It was summer. I remember the morning I picked it up, after the night before, I drove into Oxford to pick up all my mates, find them where they were hungover, roof down to the pub. It was just hilarious, to be honest. I just turned up in a car, and I think that was the start of my random car buying life, because before then I'd owned everything for a bit of time, or I'd had one car that I keep changing, and this time I just bought one out of the blue for bants, really. So when I finally sold the Mark 5 GTI, I had that over 2 years, which at this point had been the longest I owned a car, and going forward it's still one of the longest times I've owned a car. I decided that I wanted to go get something Japanese and something imported if I could. So I ended up buying a Mark II MX5, or Mazda Roaster as it's known over there. And this was the RS. Japan got a lot of special editions that were more interesting than ours. We had ones that were done by fashion brands and you got a different colour leather or whatever, but they had the RS, which had a limited slip differential, 6-speed box. The rev limiter was raised by about 500 RPM. I can't remember off the top of my head. It had like Bilstein suspension, it had a load of strut bases all over it, and it had a Bose stereo for some reason, but there you go. I had that for a while, actually, and that was so good. Really good, and I put some really good coilovers on it, put some BBS wheels off the E30 BMW and some Toyos, I think, on there, and it was good fun, great fun. First car I ever spun. But funny enough, the week I got that, I think the week after I met my now girlfriend that I'm with now, that was 2014, and she was at Bournemouth Uni. It was about an hour and a half drive for me, and most of the time I was driving in Friday traffic, so it was longer, and because I'm 6'4", especially in the legs, it wasn't very comfortable. So here it comes. I went on eBay and bought for £330 from Wales a Alfa Romeo 156 Lusso. That was a 2-litre twin spark. Yeah, got a friend of mine to go pick it up. Funny enough, he took me in his MX5. I think it was in Swansea. I want to say it was Swansea. Anyway, took me to pick it up. Guy was a bit of an alpha nut. It needed a few bits. It was a bit rusty in places. The exhaust was a bit clattery, but it had a long MOT on it. So I was like, sorry, I don't really care. I'm just going to run this into the ground. It's so comfortable. I'm enjoying this radio broadcast, but my rear windscreen's a bit foggy. I shall put it on.
Into the acute. One. The sentence in
First fuel stop we took, wouldn't start. completely dead. It was like nothing was connected, just would not start. Sat there for a bit, and I said to my friend, look, you better go, don't wait for me, I'll sort this out, I've got breakdown cover. And then the thing fired into life, and the only time it let me down from then until getting rid of it was it had a Duff battery on it, and I was jump starting it to keep it going, and I parked it in the centre of Oxford at the old, if you know Oxford, the old Westgate used to have a multi-storey car park at the old version of it. I ended up having to roll it down the ramp to bump start it, to drive to Halfords to get a battery. But the thing never let me down. I had to have the exhaust welded by a friend who still to this day does not want people knowing he welded that exhaust. So yeah, the Mazda Roaster RS, I would probably rate, I'd probably give that a 7 out of 10. 156 I'd give a 7 out of 10 as well, which might surprise people. That 2-litre twin-spark engine is brilliant. Like, the V6 is good, but it's like double the price, and it weighs more, so why wouldn't you just get the twin-spark? 150 horsepower, it's not like it's massively down on power. And the thing handled amazingly. In my one, all the bushes were absolutely dead as well. So yeah, 7 out of 10 for the Roadster, 7 out of 10 for the 156 as well. Yeah, so then I sold them both, put the money together, and decided to buy a BMW 330 Ci Sport. So yeah, it's the coupe, and in the E46 it wasn't called the M Sport, it was called the Sport, all right? Just so you know, it was called the Sport. Yeah, I had that, I didn't have it that long, and to be honest with you, it's one of the most disappointing cars I've ever owned. Not because of the way it drives or sounds. It was a lovely engine. It drove gorgeous. I loved the way it looked. I love BMW interiors at that age. But my God, they have a list of common problems longer than both my arms, my legs, and any other appendages that I can't mention. It just broke every week. And it was like a really well looked after car as well. It was just rust, yes. Lack of appeal, yes. Electrical issues, yes. Engine problems, yes. Suspension, my God, yeah. Front wishbone bushes, it went through them like every week at one point, I swear. So yeah, I can only give that about a 5 out of 10, because the driving experience was the 5. Everything else was a 0 for that car, sadly. Then I was planning a road trip around Europe with my other half, my girlfriend, and I just didn't trust it. I just thought this thing's going to break, it's going to blah, 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 it's just going to be balls. So I think I got much less than I think I lost nearly £1,000 on that in about the space of 6 months. Sold that, and I ended up buying the mintest Mark 1 Skoda Octavia VRS in yellow. I think the thing had done like 70,000 miles from new. The owner had it from about 6 months old or something, or a year old. He bought it off the first owner. And it was lovely. It drove great, and I did about 4,000 something miles. I drove all the way through Germany, down through Italy, stopping all the way to Sicily, to the tip of Sicily, spent a week there, came back, did the whole route back, never let me down once. One thing I will say about that Octavia VRS, it drove really well, and it was quite good round the ring, actually. I'd give it a 6. It's not quite there, is it? Because it's a Mark IV chassis, and there was a little bit untapped potential, I think. It surprised me, like the TT, but probably give it a 6, that one, out of 10 overall. Then I decided to delve into the world of finance properly. Sold the Octavia for good money, actually, because it was Minter, and put the deposit down on a used Toyota GT86. I kind of like the ethos of them. They're lightweight, revvy, manual gearbox, rear-wheel drive. So I bought one of those. It was red with a red interior, and I absolutely loved that car. That is a solid 8 straight away. The only issues I had with it were Toyota's customer service was a bit bad. It had really annoying little niggles that would go wrong with it. You'd take it back and they'd go, yeah, we fixed it. It'd come back and it wouldn't be. And I also hate the wheels. I think they look ugly. The tyres that come on it, I don't think they're actually Prius ones. Everyone says, oh, they're Prius tyres. I think they might be the same size, but the Prius had like eco ones, and these were called Michelin Pilot Sport Primacies. They're just dangerous because they're the breakaway for the traction. It's just falls off a cliff. So you'd go in to try and do a slide and the thing would just suddenly snap on you. I changed it for some Kumo KU39s. Perfect. It became such an easy car to slide around and have fun in. So yeah, 8 out of 10. I didn't care about the power problem really, because it had 200 horsepower, which kind of averages out of what I'd had before. So it didn't feel much slower. It was just that you had to give it some beans to make it move. Then I started going contracting work-wise, so I had a bit more money, but I also had a bit more of a commute. I bought for 650 quid a Volvo V70 estate, a diesel one. So it had the VW diesel, it had coilovers on it that was shit, and it had the T5 wheels. That was a fun car, I had it mapped and stuff. I basically was going to use that as a daily and save the GTA 6, but within about a month, I sold the GTA 6 and bought my E92 M3, which had done about 50-something thousand miles, manual, Melbourne red metallic. Don't know if it had any options other than the wheels and the carbon bits. I didn't really like the carbon bits, but they're like bonded on. And BMW, because I bought a BMW used, they actually bought brand new ones, proper ones, and had them reattached. And they also did a lot of stuff that was really bad, but I'm not going to get into it in this video. I did a Euro trip in that car, found out that it had been de-restricted, and also the one thing that I loved about it was that someone had taken all the baffles out of the pipes, so it was very loud. But inside it was fine. Inside it was really quiet when you put the windows up, which was nice, but the sound of that car... unbeatable. I adore it. There's still some videos on this channel actually of that sound of that car, and I think to this day, despite my affinity recently for the AJ V8, that is the best engine, the best V8 anyway that I've driven or anything like that. So that's a solid 8 for that. The only issues being, you know, their age and being a BMW, you were always a little bit on edge, but to be honest with you, it never let me down. I often dailied it at one point. It was just such a good car to drive, and I still regret a little bit selling it, but I've had lots of nice stuff since, so I'm not too upset. But the Volvo died because I lent it to my dad to go to the garden centre, because I said, just put the seats down, it's huge, and just ruin it, because I don't really care. Turns out, I got a call from him saying, just driving your car, and does it normally have the coolant warning light on and it's in the red? I'm like, no, stop. Oh, I want to get home, I've got to get home. So, yeah, I don't know what it had done to the cooling system, but ever since then, it would just keep dumping coolant every time you stopped the car, and it was overheating, and head gasket was fine, it was just the cooling system had a complete spaz out. I ended up finding that there was a split line around the oil cooler, and every time it got hot, it just seemed to open up and just pour. So I fixed that and sold it, but the guy who had it, then the gearbox went, so that thing's dead, I think. That was a solid 4, I think, out of that one, because it was just a bit depressing to own and drive. I did like it, but, you know. So that was the third Bora. I then bought a diesel Bora just as a daily. Around this time, I also bought my Mark II Golf. eBay purchase, the starting bid was 1,500 quid, and I won it for that. Early Mark II Golf GTI type, whatever it was, I can't remember now. Yeah, the early Mark II Golf GTIs are noticeable because they have front quarter lights in the windows. The windscreen wipers are the wrong way around. Small bumper. My one was on a D plate, so it was sort of in a weird year. It was probably one of the last Type 19s, actually. It was a really nice car, actually. It was shagged when I got it. It had, like, you know, dents and scrapes and mismatched panels, and the engine wasn't quite running right and all these stuff. And I had money at the time, so I got it fully restored on the exterior. Anyway, full respray by JF Bodyworks, great guy. Then I took it to OBD Works, my mate James, and he just did a full big service on the engine and everything like that. I replaced all the suspension on it. I did a new exhaust. New fuel pump, because I ran out of fuel the first time I drove it, and fuel pump. I just used to love hooning that thing around. It was so good to get back to basics, especially when my other car was a 400 and something horsepower M3. Getting in that thing on a sunny day, windows down, sunroof open, a couple of Oasis cassettes in there, just adored it. It was a good 7 or 8 out of 10. Yeah, I'm going to say 8 out of 10 again. Oh, God, a lot of these are such boring bloody things, aren't there? Around the time I had that GTI, I got a lease car. I don't know if you can count me as owning this, but I count it as one of the cars I had. So yeah, brand spanking new, Mark 7.5 Golf GTI, manual cloth seats, Merlin, what was it? Black Rubin or Rubin Black, which they only seem to do for 7.5, and it was the standard colour, actually, the no option colour, but I think they did it to try to make a bit of a Marmite colour a lot of people didn't like, so people optioned for metallics and stuff, but I love the colour, and the car is probably, still to this day, to me, the greatest car in the world. It's a 10 out of 10. That's all you need to know. The Golf R, sod that, you don't need the Golf R. It looks worse, sounds chavvy, it's more boring to drive because it's four-wheel drive. Most of them are DSG and been ragged to high heaven. The GTI is the sweet spot, and a manual one. You agree, don't you? You never saw that car. No. But yeah, a manual Golf GTI Mark 7.5 is the one to buy. At the end of my lease, they offered me it for something like 17.5 grand. Since then, it's changed hands twice, both of them in the mid-20s. So there you go. 10 out of 10. I can't fault it. Yeah, I eventually did sell the M3. I think I had that for a couple of years almost, or maybe a year and a half. And I just thought, you know what? Yeah, it's about a year and a half. I thought, time to change, put some money in the bank and just not have any finance or loans for a little bit. So then we had the summer of 2018 where it was unbelievable heat wave, if you remember. And this 986 Boxster S facelift came up really cheap, sort of 80,000 miles, which is the sweet spot for a Porsche. You don't want one with too little mileage, and if one's got too much mileage, you probably want to see some good bills in it. This thing had a full immaculate service history. The guy had taken it in Part X for a motorbike. He was a motorbike dealer down in the New Forest, picked it up and then enjoyed the entire summer, roof down, boiling hot weather. It was good fun. Tracked it as well. Probably got some videos of that to show you. Had a sports exhaust and an intake, but pretty standard other than that. It was a good spec car, really fun actually. Still nice to drive actually in the winter with the roof up. It's a warm car, but didn't gel with it too much. It just felt a bit slow, and I don't know if that's because I just come from the M3, but I do think it was the fact that it had such long gearing. It just felt you were constantly running, you were just, you know, using 1 or 2 gears, and it just didn't feel quite as fun as I hoped, I guess. But I'd still give it a 7 out of 10, I reckon. It was still a really nice car, the sound it made, and it was still very, very, very much Porsche. Don't let anyone tell you it's not, because it bloody well is. It's great. So yeah, 7 out of 10 for that. Right, then what happened? Well, I sold the Boxster and once again told myself I don't need 2 cars. I've got my GTIs, I've got both of them, both great cars. But then I was perusing eBay. I have a saved search for track car, because I do like doing a few track days, and something came up that I just wanted straight away, and it was a John Cooper Works Cooper S 59 plate, so it's the N14 engine. I think standard they had about 208 or 208 for the N14. This one had a lot done to it, and it was all the good stuff. Firstly, the car was green, always good. It had I think it had KWs on it when I bought it. Yeah, it had a Quave diff. It had big yellow speed brake kit at the front, half cage harnesses, Recaro pole positions, and a few other bits. But it had been tuned. It must have had about 270, 280 brake. Talking to some of the tuners that were involved, they said it had probably about 270, 280 horsepower. That is, to this day, probably the most hilarious car I've owned in terms of like actual laugh out loud, giggling car. The noises it made were just so, they were rude. it sounded like a fart when you were driving it, and when you lifted off, it just sounded like someone was letting off a firework in your ear. And on track, pretty much untouchable unless you had over 400 horsepower. Honestly. Biblically fast, even with an idiot like me behind the wheel. But alas, sensibilities kicked in when the Golf went back from its lease. I was very sad to see it go, but I don't need to spend loads of money on a car. I'm not going to buy it. I'll just daily the Cooper. Yeah, that wasn't good. In the end, I was like, no, I probably should do something about having another car. So I sold the Mini and I put all the money in a deposit for a brand new M2 Competition. So I spec mine as, it was Hockenheim Silver, which was one of the competition special colours. So I thought I'll spec that because it was either that or black, really. It had the M2 Plus pack, which basically meant it had like adaptive lights, blah, blah, blah. And the most important thing is it was a manual, which is the correct choice. And yeah, I had that for just over a year, I think, actually. Very strange car, actually, because the gearbox was exactly the same as the E92. Quite a bit of an oddly long throw, but you could always find a gear. It wasn't loose or anything, but the clutch bearing made this noise like it was about to rattle its way out of the bell housing or whatever every time you drove it. And it scared me, 92, because I thought it was on the way out, but then I bought a brand new one and same gearbox. Oh, same thing, yeah. Engine in that car, surprisingly revvy. I remember when I finally ran it in, I was like, oh my God, there's like another 100 horsepower up here, revving the thing out. Not as characterful as the V8, you know, it's turbocharged and stuff, but it was devastatingly fast. Like, I was faster on a B road in it. I think it just, the damping was just a bit more modern, and it felt great. It felt great. Took it on Wales to run it in to see the rally with my friend who bought an identical one, but in black at the same time. We both picked them up pretty much the same time. We both went on the same trip. It was a bit, yeah, homoerotic, but yeah, what a car. Of course it is. It's a £50,000 BMW. What do you expect? But yeah, last of a breed. I can see why values of those, they're doing all right, aren't they? God, my record is nearly at half an hour on this now. I probably will have edited it down for you, but sorry if you're still with me. Well done. Yeah, then the pandemic hit. So I went to Japan for 2 weeks, and when I landed, there was a lockdown the next day. So the BMW didn't really get used. When it started to get lifted, the restrictions a bit, I bought for, how much did I pay? 650 quid for an MG ZT. Very surprising car. Very surprising, actually. It was the lower horsepower one, the 160. I just bought it on a whim because it was up the road and they said it had an airbag light and it was a Part X, but had a few months MOT on it. Got it home, wiggled the airbag connector under the seat, and it was fixed because Rover. And yeah, it was a really nice car, actually. It was quite low mileage, really comfortable, quite fun to drive. And still to this day, actually, one of the best front-wheel drive chassis I've driven. Well, the most impressive, I'd say, because there's lighter, more fun hot hatches I've had, but it was very, very, very impressive what they did with that saloon to make it handle like that, because it was really fun and quite precise. I took it around Donington on a track day, and you know, you could throw it in, lift off, get the back end round to turn in. I'd give that a solid, give that a 7, actually. I'd give that a 7. It was just that impressive, genuinely, that impressive. Then I bought a Clio with the money from it. Finally got myself a 182. For years and years and years, I kept thinking about buying one, and I finally did. This one was dirt cheap in London, a bit scuffed up, needed belts, blah, blah, blah. Took it to get belts done, tidied it up, tracked it, and then sold it for profit. Clio 182s, there's 1, 2, 3 on this list. 3 on this list that I've owned. All of them get a 9 out of 10. Just to make it clear, I love that car, and I bought it back. So you could say I've owned that car twice. Is that another number? I didn't count it, but yeah, brilliant cars, brilliant. Crap driving position. It's French, but you know what? You just don't care when you drive it. They're just so good. Even for a lanky guy like me, where I looked a bit like Donkey Kong. Next purchase was, well, actually, no. I think, did I buy? Yeah, I still had the M2 when I bought this, actually. I bought a friend of mine who works for a very high-end dealership. I'm talking McLaren F1s, F40s, blah, blah, blah. This car had come in as part of an estate sale. Someone had passed away. It was a 2003 XJR, so it was the newer one, which is all aluminium. So actually, I looked it up, and its curb weight was the same as a Golf R estate, but it has a 400 horsepower supercharged AJ V8 in it. This one had done 206,000 miles, but it had been serviced at Jaguar every year, sometimes twice a year, religiously, by the second owner who'd had it from about a year old till he died. It had 2 service books, both of them full. It had a folder full of receipts. The guy had obviously pranged it a couple of times, but he took it to Jaguar and paid to have it fixed, not an insurance job. Very impressive car again, quite comfortable, oodles of power, effortless, and for an automatic, it could hold a drift really well. It just looked hilarious that, you know, Grandad was drifting his wagon. Best part about that car is I bought it for 1,800 quid and sold it for 6 grand. So yeah, I have a Breitling upstairs that I call my Jaguar watch, because I sold it and the next day I bought the Breitling, because why not? Why not waste your money that you just got? Yes, and it was time for the M2 to go. That was sort of a product of the pandemic, really. I didn't understand why I was paying finance for a car that I barely drove, and also the values of them were doing really well. So I managed to have a brand new car and walk away with cash in my pocket. So it was sort of a done deal, really, to sell it to, I think it was Redline that bought it. This editing is going to be a nightmare, half an hour, and I'm just talking shite. So yeah, sold the M2, and I would give that was a 9. Just had to be, didn't it? It's such a good car. Yeah, and then I was sort of looking around. I bought my, I ended up, when I sold the XJR, I actually bought my Clio back, the black one that had the 182. I was sort of tooling around in that for a bit and decided, look, there's one car I've always wanted. Now's the time, as prices are just going silly. So I bought the worst, probably, for sale, 996. It was the exact spec I wanted. It had a loud interior. It was silver. It was a 98 car, so cable throttle, less... I think the viewers are yawning too, mate. I've been here a long time. 98 car, cable throttle, no traction control. It was a lot lighter. It's the lightest 996 they ever did. It was lighter than the RS, weirdly, the GT3 RS. 380 horsepower, blah, blah, blah. Mine would have done about just under 100,000 when I bought it. The guy I bought it from was, yeah, I'm not going to be mean about him, but yeah, he'd reconditioned it after, basically someone died. A lot of dead people cars in my history as well, sadly. He bought it at the beginning of like lockdown and what have you. Done it up because it had been sat around for 2 years after the guy died. And he had his mate respray it. He serviced it. He got it MOT. He replaced some bits and bobs, blah, blah, blah. Basically everything he did I had to redo. Except the paint, because that was so bad. I just looked at it and I was like, I'm not even going to touch that. So it also came, it was another de-chavifying car. It came on, it wasn't chavvy, it just had the later lights on it and the big GT3/sport design wheels. So I got rid of those and the lights, and the money that I sold those for paid for the new lights, the new wheels, and a set of brand new Michelin Pilot Sport 4Ss. And I think I was still like 50 quid up. So that was a good one. And I only paid 12 grand for the car as well. Yeah, I talked about in that for a while. I even dailied it for a while. It was my only car for a little while as well. Winter, summer. And you know, they say never meet your heroes. That's a 10 out of 10. That and the Mark 7 Golf GTI, Mark 7.5, sorry, Golf GTI. 10 out of 10. Best car I have ever owned. Best car I've ever driven for me. It had every little box ticked. That early 996 is actually surprisingly raw inside. It's still comfortable, but it's got quite a lot of engine noise and road noise in there because of the less sound deadening. And my God, the way it drove. I adored that engine. I adored the handling. Once I'd replaced all the coffin arms, and put the better tyres in it and got the tracking done, it was just unbelievably good. And selling it is probably one of my biggest regrets. But I sold it to a friend who's still got it, and he knows that if he ever has to sell it or whoever wants to, it's to me. But that car was tatty, and I loved it tatty as well, because I could just drive it anywhere, do anything in it. I just didn't care. Didn't care about any IMS bearings either or any of that rubbish. I just enjoyed the car. Parked it where I want. He'd been in it loads. It's probably, he hates cars. It's one of the only cars he enjoyed being in. Yeah, I'm not going to cry, but yeah, it was a bad idea. Then my import came in, Volvo V70R. Imported that all myself.
Hello, Panasonic navigation system.
That was a 6. No, yeah, it was a 6. Loved the car, build quality. It was like a battle tank, proper battle wagon. But that automatic gearbox is awful, and whoever put it in there should be ashamed of themselves. But it was Japanese, it was mint at least. When I got rid of that, I was kind of missing having an estate, so I bought a E39 528i manual, lowered, nice car. Guy before me did all the work on it himself, did a good job on it. There was a couple of parts that failed. I think they were just cheap parts that I redid, but really nice bloke. Kept in touch with him. I still spoke to him the other day, actually. Really good chap. But I didn't like the car. It was very crap to drive. Sorry, 39 owners. It was slow. And the worst thing was the electronic throttle. It was just so difficult to pull away because it was, you either over rev it or didn't, and then everything felt a bit like mushy, and then you had the BMW gear shift, which is long and a bit floppy, and that was a really good car. The engine was really strong, and it still just felt a bit, so I ended up selling that. Yeah, like I say, that was about 6 out of 10, just because it's BMW. I kind of liked having the older BMW. There were then 2 other 182s and a 172. 182 gets 9, 172 gets 8. Not quite as good. It just isn't. Next import came in then. Obviously, I think I said a minute ago I went to Japan before. But I've always loved Japanese cars, Japanese culture. I've been obsessed, and going there didn't help. So obviously, during the pandemic, I was just on Japanese auctions, buying cars, bringing them over. Crown Athlete Estate, mint car, lovely, loved the way they look. Didn't bother with a turbo because they're 3 times the price, half the reliability, and who cares if you're going fast than that? I just wanted to be comfortable. That was probably a 7 out of 10, really like that, sold it. Bought another Mark 5 Golf GTI, you know my rating from earlier. Then the next import came in, which was a Toyota Crown Athlete 60th anniversary, 3.5, blah, blah, blah. You probably don't know what these are either. These are the best hidden secret in Japan. I think I sold it for 7. I think it owed me 5.5 by the time it was landed and all registered. And that thing only had like 50,000 miles on it, 2007. You know, heated leather, electric seats, electric everything. All the technology in it was amazing because Japan had the swingy vents when you pressed the button, and the vents would automatically swish side to side. Best thing about that car was it was bloody quick for 300 horsepower. It's the same engine they use, or a relation to, that they use in Lotus, the V6s, when they supercharge them and things. So, but with direct injection. So yeah, 315 horsepower actually. And the auto box is actually really good in that car. It was really it would kick down. I don't like autos, but it would suited that car. We drove down to Cornwall with this one. Again, he hates cars. Slept like a baby in that one in the back. Just because it's so comfortable. And, oh, also the heat seats are the hottest I've ever experienced in my life. They were borderline dangerous. That's a 9. That car is a 9. So let's go through the 9s. Mark 5 Golf GTI, Clio 182, and the Crowns. Then was the free Yaris. Sold the Mark 5 to my friend, and he gave me that as part X, but didn't really take anything off the asking price for it. If you looked at either my previous, one of my first video vlogs, or Danny DCT's video, you'll know how that car ended. Great car, actually. I'll give that a solid 7 for what it was. And then there's the TT. Yeah, you know that one, Noggy blue, blah, blah, blah. Probably a 7 out of 10. Nice surprise, but nothing that compared to some of the other stuff I've owned. And then there's the Range Rover. And that enters in at a lovely 9. I am smitten with that thing. First 4x4. Had always wanted a 322, and it did not. Much like the 911, always wanted one, didn't disappoint. And the GTIs. Any car I've always wanted and I bought, it hasn't disappointed yet. So, yeah. As you can see, he's yawning. You're probably yawning. I hope you enjoyed this little vlog with me just talking and pictures flashing up. Lots more videos to come as ever. Like and subscribe, etc. Don't worry. Range Rover's staying for a good while, and I've got loads and loads of different ideas for that. And me and Dan want to do a few more videos together because we love doing the green laning one. And as ever, thanks for watching. This has been Tired Format and me on the sofa. I'm Jason. This is Snoopy. Have a wonderful day, evening, morning, whatever.